Hello and welcome back to the West Ham Breakdown with me, Jack Elderton, and my mate Callum Goodall. And West Ham have won their first game of the season. I was distinctly concerned that we might get to the international break without getting 3 points on the board, especially with Man City up next. But it's a big win against Crystal Palace. It's a big lift to the whole place, to the squad and to the fans. And actually, in many ways, it was quite a good performance as well.
Yeah, particularly away from home at Selhurst Park. I think that's a really good result. We all know what Selhurst Park can be like. I've actually never been, and I keep saying I want to go because the atmosphere is sort of lauded as being one of the best. But yeah, I think it was a really, really good away performance. And yeah, pleased to sort of mark the start of the new era. I think, like you, I was a bit concerned, particularly when the team sheet came out and there was no changes. I was like, oh boy, here we go. But yeah, you know what? We ground it out. We hung in there, and I think one of the probably biggest changes from last season is that we were able to manage the game by bringing players off the bench and pushing ourselves over the line, rather than what happened last season where we'd bring players on and sort of retreat and go, and it actually made things worse, which is a real nice place to be and bodes well moving forward.
It's amazing to be able to bring so much quality off the bench, and for someone like Crescencio Somerville to not even get on the pitch. That's an absurd situation for us to be in, given where we've been over the last few years with a manager that much prefers such a small squad that really only has 11 players that are going to play each week. Big difference with Lopetegui, who's obviously very, very keen on building a whole squad and 20 players really that are all capable of playing in that first 11, which is a good thing, I think.
100%.
Especially for those players who have probably had a settled place in the lineup for a long time, to have that pressure suddenly of needing to perform every single week and in every section of every game, because if you don't, you're going to come off the pitch, even if you're someone like Bowen or Paquetá who would just think, this is my spot and no one's going to take that away from me. I think it's a really good thing for the squad to have that competition, and it helped us a lot in this game. It'll be interesting to see whether a lot of those players will come in as starters from this point onwards, and we'll discuss that at the end of the podcast, because there are a couple of players that came on in this match that we think probably will nab first choice spots after their performances from the bench in this one. But I think the best place to start discussing the game really is just how impressive the back two were. I mean, the biggest takeaway, the biggest positive feeling after this, had a season where centre-back was such a big issue for us and performances of the centre-backs was such a huge issue. Again, like we said in the post-Villa podcast, a lot of pressure on Kilman to perform after the fee that's being paid for him, and a lot of pressure on Mavropanos really to perform if he wants to have any hope of keeping a spot in the first 11 after the arrival of Jean-Claude Todibo. And I think both of them answered those questions magnificently, really, in this game, particularly Kilman, who I think really put in one of the best centre-back performances I've seen in the entire time that we've been, this show has been on the road, really.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. I'm slightly concerned that the podcast is going to become the Max Kilman show week in, week out now. So we might struggle to find interesting ways to talk about how good he is. But yeah, really proving that price tag. There was obviously a lot of question marks. I think probably around whether he was worth it, but also I think that was probably drummed up a bit by Wolves fans as well online, saying, oh, he's not that good, there's no way he's worth that much. And to be honest, if he maintains this form, I'd say he's probably worth more, given his age profile and the fact that he's English. And we knew when we signed him, we said that this is someone that, if he does kick on, could be knocking on the door of the England team, given the lack of general depth in those areas, particularly a lacking a left footer as well. And I think what he could offer, like I say, if he maintains this form, is huge, huge upside at the start of a new era for England as well, in the same way that he's at the start of a new era under Lopetegui. We're going to have a new manager there, whether that's Lee Carsley or not. And yeah, inspired. But I think Mavropanos alongside him, we have to give him credit, because it would be easy to forget about him. Because he's been here already and because of how exciting Kilman is, but he's really stepped up to a new level. And I think we were joking before the pod, it's just such a nice problem for us to have when we were so excited about the arrival of Todibo, one of the best young centre-backs in Europe in terms of what his ceiling is and how have we ended up with him with all the clubs that he was linked with. And now I'm looking at Mavropanos going, oh, okay, Todibo, good luck, mate, because this guy is forming quite the partnership with your supposed partner. So, which is just such a pleasure. But I think what was most pleasing for me to see is that we know what Mavropanos can do progressively, and that is great to see. Obviously, it's something that we've wanted to see more of and hoped for with the new manager. But I think something that we questioned a lot throughout the Moyes tenure was his ability to defend the box. And I think we probably looked at the partnership and assumed, Kilman will pick up the slack there and Mavro will do a lot of the progressive stuff or the channel stuff. But in terms of defending the box from crosses, in terms of tracking runners, I thought he was exceptional. He won every aerial duel. He didn't really get bullied at all. There was a few occasions where Eze gets in behind and stuff, but I don't think that was ever really his fault at all. And I think when you consider it in the context of that sort of rustiness in the Vigo pre-season game where he allowed the runner to run across him and it was kind of unforgivable and we were a bit like, oh, this isn't going to bode well. The way that he's managed to kick on in terms of his sharpness just over the space of 2 games and take it to these levels is really reassuring. And yeah, like I say, does bring real question marks about Todibo because at the minute, I don't think you can drop Mavropanos based on the performances he's put in the last 2 games.
I think Todibo will get his chance. Undoubtedly, he's a player of such quality that he will certainly come in at some point and prove why he has developed kind of the perception around him that he has. I do agree with you. I think it's very hard to drop Mavropanos after the performances that he's put in. The big question for Mavropanos is, can he maintain that level of performance now? It's 2 game weeks. It's really good to see him perform so well in the first 2 game weeks, but it's got to be, it's got to be 10, 15, 20, 25, 30, 38 game season. You've got to sustain that over a really long period of time. I do think he was our best centre-back last season. He has had plenty of moments at West Ham where he makes silly decisions and it puts the team in positions that the team shouldn't have to be in. But generally, in terms of his dual dominance, he was way out ahead of the other centre-backs last season in terms of how he performed. And now in a new system where you're seeing him have to defend the channels more, have to defend wide much more often, and produce what he's always produced really in terms of his ability to win aerial duels, that combination, much like you're seeing with Kilman, is really bringing the best out of him. And it's something that's really nice to see in terms of having a technical director that's clearly set out a style of play that works for the players, that some of the players that we had here and the players that he wanted to bringing in a manager that then actually makes sense in terms of getting those players to perform very well in that system, in that style. And that's something that's just so good to see at West Ham because it's so foreign, that concept that we would have that good sort of through line in terms of how we want to approach things, top to bottom, bringing in players that make sense for how the manager would want to play and how we want to obviously play as a club, and seeing the centre-backs then produce on the pitch. It's just a really nice thing to see all the way through for at West Ham, like I say, because it's just so unusual for us to see at the club. Mavropanos not the only player, by the way, to record 100% aerial duel success in the game. Kilman did as well. And I don't want to gloss over Kilman in any way because I almost think we could spend half an hour delving into all of the data associated with his performance. But I think it's most progressive passes. He's got nearly 100% pass completion on short, 97% on medium passes, carried the ball more than anyone else, gets an assist, 100% aerial duel success, 100% tackle success. I mean, it was genuinely a faultless, flawless centre-back display. And if he was lacking consistency at Wolves, if he's able to establish consistency on that level of performance at West Ham, then we would have an utterly exceptional player on our hands and someone that would be not just a shoe-in for the England squad, but a shoe-in for the starting 11 if he plays like that. Yeah,
I mean, as you say, it was like the perfect, well-rounded, modern-day centre-back performance in terms of what you want your centre-backs to offer, and capped it off with that lovely gliding run to start the transition for the goal. And it was just incredible, like to see him sort of almost dribbling like Goodison, the way that he rolled challenges and was just like, nah, I'm still going, you can't bring me down.
And the pass as well. Yeah, the pass is brilliant.
like fizzed switch through the gap to even spot it while he's on the move is, yeah, incredible. Perfectly weighted. Yeah, and I think, like you say, in terms of that left centre back spot in the England team, Kilman and Stones next to each other is a really exciting prospect as two centre backs that can just willingly dribble into midfield and help you in sort of build up, and aren't scared to take on those sort of progressive responsibilities. I think would be crazy. Even better when you factor in that he's basically 6'5" and a beast in the air as well. It's kind of like it's that model, the profile rather, of something like where you don't actually have to make a sacrifice. It's like usually you go, oh, I want someone that can carry into the middle, but they're not that good in the air. But it's fine because it's a net positive. If Kilman, honestly, like you say, if he did that performance every week, you wouldn't be able to find someone better. It's just crazy. And yeah, just such a good signing. Like you say, we could do a whole pod on just how good he is, but long may it continue, I think, is the main takeaway.
I think what you're saying about, you know, how rounded his profile is so important as well, because ultimately when we reflect on the fee, of course it's inflated by the fact that he's English. Of course it's inflated by the fact that he's played in the Premier League over a long period of time, and he's even captained another Premier League team. So of course the fee is going to be high. But even if he wasn't any of those things, the fee would be high anyway because of what you're saying, because he has everything. You're not compromising on anything. The only thing that's been a doubt with Kilman is, would he be able to do it week in, week out, and step into the shoes of the leader at the back? Not someone that is playing second fiddle or performs well when the rest of the team plays well, or takes guidance from the players around him and needs other players around him to be performing at their best level to get the best out of him, or needs the right system to, you know, a lot of Wolves fans are saying he needs a back three or whatever like that. That's completely fallen out the window in the first two games we see at West Ham. We see someone who's dominant, really comfortable, really unbelievably confident, both in and out of possession, and that rubs off on everyone around him. So we're seeing the inverse of what we saw Wolves fans saying, where it's like, well, he needs Dawson next to him, and if Dawson plays well and brings that kind of energy, then you get the best out of Kilman. Kilman's having that effect on Mavropanos right now, which is exactly what we need. So I'm really pleased that it's worked out. There's a reason why we were so keen before Lopetegui even joined. We really, really liked him as an option for us and thought he would be an instant fix for a lot of the problems that we had at the back, and he's proving that early on. I think one thing that is worth talking about before we move on to some other really top performances from this game is just that confidence in build-up as well, because there's a lot greater deep build-up requirements on the team now under Lopetegui. And there's a situation, it's not even the one that he dribbles out for the goal, but where he receives the ball deep. I'm not sure who it is that plays it back to him. It's in the first half. He gets pressed, and he kind of just leans. It's Edouard who's pressing him. He kind of leans to his left. And then just drives out 10 yards forward with the ball, and Edouard's just sent the wrong way completely. And, you know, it takes him a while to slow down and turn around and try and chase back. And it's just that unbelievable degree of complete confidence that, oh yeah, just drop a body feint as the last man, no problems. And it doesn't make you feel like maybe you did when Issa Diop did it at West Ham, or when Naya Fagerd has done it at West Ham, where it's like, well, you know, this could come off or it could go terribly wrong. You just have this sensation that he's fine. There's no problems there. No one's going to win the ball off of him. Yeah,
and I think that will be really good going forward, because whilst we are singing all of his praises, there will inevitably be times where he does make mistakes just by way of the way he plays, right? It comes with the territory.
And the position.
Yeah, in
you're just going to make mistakes in that place.
Van Dijk has made heinous mistakes. Alisson on the ball has made mistakes. Edison, even last weekend, made mistakes. That just comes with it. But I think one of the issues that we had was with players like Agurd, and to a lesser extent Mavropanos last season, I think they became more known for those mistakes, and therefore the confidence issue that knocks on and the fans get on their backs. Whereas the fact that he's come in with a sort of clean slate and he's building this reputation as someone that is immensely confident, and we back them, we feel comfortable rather than constantly feeling on edge about it. It will encourage him to do it more, but it means that I think there'll be more of an understanding when he does inevitably trip up, because we'll have all those memories of, wow, well, he's been doing this so well for weeks, so he was going to make a mistake at some point, but that's fine. Whereas I think before it was like, oh, Agurd again, he needs to stop doing this, it's ridiculous. I think that will be really beneficial. It's a great place to be building from in terms of a foundation.
Yeah, another top performer in this game that we probably weren't expecting to be playing such a key role this season under Lopetegui was Thomas Souček, and obviously gets his goal and has really huge impact in the opposition box. Added a great degree of kind of link up play in the first half, particularly, back to goal, pushing into centre backs, receiving the ball, rolling, really comfortable on it. Looked so good in those situations. But he played as part of a midfield unit that was exactly the same as the Villa match, and played long as well, much like it did in the Villa match, but was reconfigured slightly. And that's what we'll come on to next. We're going to have a little break first, but that's what we're going to talk about in the next section. So in the preview podcast, which we did before the game, and you can access each week on our Patreon ahead of the match, where we talk about our theoretical tactics for each game after doing a full deep dive with Darcy's help on the opposition and all of their data. We spoke about the idea of playing long less often, there being an opportunity to do the thing that we'd been speaking about not doing, which would be bringing Somerville in and playing Kudus as well, and kind of focusing on keeping the ball a little bit more and dominating the game through having possession of the ball and not entering into kind of a ding-dong physical battle with Crystal Palace, trying to play the game a little bit differently. And, well, that's not what we did. We did the exact opposite. And one of the reasons, though, that we spoke about not doing that is because the evidence that we'd seen in the Villa match from the style of sort of more long ball focus, more direct focus play with Paquetá, Rodriguez and Souček in the midfield was that there would be too much decompaction in that unit. The players would be too far away from each other, with Souček getting up alongside the striker, Rodriguez dropping between the centre-backs, and Paquetá kind of isolated in the middle on his own. And you feel, well, we certainly felt that with Lerma and Wharton, or we thought it might be Decore and Wharton, that there would just be too much ball-winning ability in that area and an ability to go and dominate the second balls, that we would go long, perhaps not win the duels, or even if we did, we wouldn't actually be able to create anything off of it because we wouldn't be sustaining any level of possession and pressure as a result of playing that way. But instead of changing players, we saw a slightly different approach to exactly the same tactics in this game. And it was one that used Paquetá less often as a kind of through line and someone that we always play into and are looking for him to kind of find the silver bullet solution in the middle of the pitch every time he gets on the ball. Instead of that, we dropped him alongside Guido Rodriguez. Rodriguez didn't drop quite as much between the centre-backs. We saw more responsibility given to the centre-backs in build-up. And perhaps we're somewhat helped on that side of things just by Palace's shape, and obviously them, instead of playing from a 4-4-2, playing from that 3-4-3 base, which maybe means that there's that you haven't got two players immediately running up and pressing your centre backs. It doesn't become a 4v4 on the back line. It stays a 3v4. So maybe you don't need Guido Rodriguez to drop between them and give them that extra time. So we saw, Paquetá and Rodriguez, but still Souček further ahead, and the same approach to actually playing long, but not doing it through Paquetá, doing it through the centre backs or the goalkeeper, and then trying to win the second ball in those situations, and different roles as a result for those midfielders, with Paquetá less in there for, okay, do something creative when you get on the ball for us, and more in there for a little bit bite in midfield, for winning those second balls and trying to help us generate something off of those situations. And actually, in many ways, but for a performance that didn't go to plan from Mikel Antonio, which we'll come on to at the end of the podcast, in that first half, everything around Antonio actually functioned quite well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it's quite funny, isn't it, looking at the numbers of a midfield trio, I suppose you'd call it, of Souček, Rodriguez and Paquetá, and Paquetá's the one that comes out with the most ball recoveries, by quite some way as well. He comes out of the game with 10 ball recoveries, which is excellent. I think one thing that I think you've covered the midfield blend really well there. I think one thing that I noticed, and I think it was hugely beneficial, was that Rodriguez and Paquetá seemed to have a much better, I suppose for want of a better word, sort of positional understanding in this game. It felt like they marshaled their specific areas a lot more strictly. There was more discipline in terms of Paquetá wasn't firing out, like he wasn't running miles away and then being huge gaps between the midfield for them to play through. There were it felt as though when they did do that, it was timed correctly, and Paquetá was just winning them a lot, which is great. Long may that continue. But I think that's kind of a knock-on effect of the decision making. It wasn't constant, it wasn't ill-advised, and I think they sort of felt as though they were more of a structured screen in front of the centre backs, I guess, which I think is hugely beneficial, and also I think helps in terms of, like you say, those transitional might not be the right word, but those sort of moments where, okay, Paquetá's going to receive, and you might assume that he's going to turn out and play forward, but instead he just gives it back to Kilman or gives it back to Mavropanos, and then they're the ones that fire it forward. And just being there and having those, both of them as sort of reliable receivers off the centre-backs, but not the primary progressors, even though Paquetá was still the most progressive midfielder for us, I think was good. I'm not sure if it's like something that I necessarily want to see week in, week out moving forward. I think I'd like to see us still play through the thirds a little bit more, but I think against this opposition it did make a lot of sense, and I mean the proof's in the pudding, right? It worked really well, so you can't really complain beyond that. But like I say, I think against different opposition we will look to play a little bit more and possession dominant, I guess, and I think we've seen glimpses of that being possible. I think the spaces between midfielders in possession probably do need to reduce more to do that. But I think also one of the positives that we've seen, which you alluded on and is sort of tangentially related, is the idea of once we've gone long, Paquetá and Rodriguez stepping up to be there to receive the second ball. And in terms of transitioning towards a more possession dominant side, the idea that Paquetá and Rodriguez are already becoming well versed in knowing when to step up and how to step up, in terms of stifling the opposition and being able to maintain waves of pressure, which is something you want to do when you're trying to dominate possession. Having them there to sort of spring on and stop these counters and then recycle the ball and build and dominate possession in that way will be really impressive, and it's something that I'm excited to see happen, presumably, as we move forward into the season.
Yeah, I mean, it obviously didn't go perfectly, right? Because Palace did generate a couple of really good chances in that first half from counter-attacks. But if we were just purely looking at those two midfielders in that role of, okay, when the ball does go long, can you jump out and try and win it really quickly so that we can set an attack from those situations? I would have to say that I thought both Paquetá and Guido Rodriguez did a really good job of that in the first half of trying to make that work. So what we sort of started to see come together, and it didn't really work well for us ultimately because we didn't establish enough control, partly because Antonio didn't do a good job at all at the top of the pitch. Nothing really stuck with him. He wasn't winning any duels. When he did win duels, he would lose the ball straight away afterwards, and it was a real struggle for us to kind of get anything going through Mikhail. And also because, and I think this is actually really key and a really important thing for us to probably start discussing, even though it's very early in the season. Alphonse Areola, fantastic shot-stopping keeper, makes a great save from Eze, and another one in the second half from Sarr. It was offside. I'm not sure if it actually was offside on review, whether Daniel Munoz was offside from the ball that goes in behind for him. But two good saves, one obviously that didn't end up counting. That side of his game, really, really good. Some of his shorter distribution and maybe not so easy to press as other goalkeepers. That doesn't mean that he's exceptional at that side of the game, but he's okay at that side of the game. One clear weakness, and it's something that really popped up in the in the first half, is that when he's asked to tonk the ball long, he's not very good at tonking the ball long. He misses his teammates a hell of a lot, and it created, in combination with Antonio struggling on the duels, these transitional situations where Palace were able to get these counter-attacks going and generate some momentum in the game that they may not have had otherwise if those two things weren't happening. And I think what I'm trying to say is I don't want that to sort of take away from the performances of those three midfielders and the fact that there is something there. There's something being built there in these first few weeks that I don't think we'll see as a primary solution this season. I don't think we'll see that as plan A, but maybe actually that could be quite a nice plan B in games if it's not quite going our way. Yeah, you can actually bring Thomas Souček on. You can just slap it long. You can go with Paquetá and Guido Rodriguez at the base of your midfield. Those two are going to try and snap in and win the ball. And then you're going to have these sorts of situations off the back of that where you might be able to get the ball into Bowen or Kudus quite quickly and get into sort of more chaotic attacking conditions where those two are probably at their best. Yeah,
100%. I think, I mean, having a plan B is always good. Yeah. you have to have one really, and I think at times during the Moyes years, I think that was a big gripe, was that we didn't really often seem to have a plan B when things weren't going wrong, whether that was because we didn't have the personnel to bring on to actually impact a game and make change, or because Moyes didn't have the tactical nous in certain game states to be able to affect change on the pitch. So I think, like you say, looking at the squad, but also looking at how active Lopetegui was to spot issues and remedy them with his substitutes in the game, I think bodes really well. Being able to have that sort of roll of the dice, like you say, with Souček, but also someone like Somerville, if we want to go more direct, but keep it on the deck and have a ball carrying threat, I think is a huge plus. We've not just got which is difficult, because on the one hand, when you squad build, you do want to have continuity, succession, in terms of, okay, we've lost one player and we've got someone who's like for like that you can bring in so that the drop off isn't significant. But at the same time, you want to have a squad where you have different options, rather than, which is the situation we were in before, where it's like, okay, the players we can bring on basically just do the same function as the player we took off. So we're not actually changing the game. We're just bringing on someone who's got fresher legs. So I think, yeah, the way the squad's shaping up and the way we've seen it be utilised so far is really exciting. And I think Souček just generally, he's just such a fascinating player. And I think what you said at the top of the pod in terms of his hold-up play around the box in this game was just crazy, in his combination play. And I just wonder, I wonder if any managers ever thought, can I just turn him into a centre-forward? Because his hold-up play is great. You can go long to him. His movement in the box is exceptional. He's dominant in the box. He can actually strike a ball pretty well from the deck as well. We've seen him.
His shooting is
fantastic,
really good.
So I'm just I don't know. I guess there are obviously reasons why you wouldn't. I mean, he's not exactly a mobile bloke, but I'm sure there will be a manager somewhere that doesn't need his strikers to be mobile. So just maybe one day we'll see him leave West Ham and someone will just go, right, sod it, he's a striker now. And I'd be all for it.
I'd enjoy watching it for sure. I think one of the things that you would lose with that is that he is really good arriving in the situations like he does for the goal that he gets, where he arrives last on the edge of the box or last into the box and box crashes, right?
Yeah.
And that's where he gets so many of his goals and where he's at his absolute best. And you probably wouldn't get that so much if he was an out and out striker. I mean, like I said, we weren't expecting the first 2 games of the season to see us having kind of this it's a real Souček build around. It's we're playing to get the best out of Thomas Souček. That's how it's felt to us anyway in the first 2 matches. And maybe we didn't get that in the first game, even though he got all those chances. I mean, he's second behind Erling Haaland for XG over the first 2 game weeks, and first in the league over for MPX for non-penalty expected goals, which is, I mean, nuts. The guy's a massive inverted commas defensive midfielder, right? So, bonkers that he's recording that. And it really proves how much the system has been built around him. And maybe we would have been talking after that first game week about, and not maybe, we would have been talking after that first game week about an exceptional Thomas Souček performance had he put his chances away. And it's mad that we're in that situation, because Lopetegui's managed to craft the role for him where actually all the stuff in between doesn't really matter. What it ultimately comes down to for Thomas in games is, can you win the ball in the air in both boxes? And then when your chances come, can you stick it in the back of the net? And it means that the way you analyze his performance can so easily oscillate from like a 5 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10, dependent on whether the 2 shots he takes in the game go in or not, or hit the target or not, is probably a better way of framing it. We talked about Paquetá and how he did a better job in sort of adding bite in midfield, and I think we'll see more from him in a sort of more progressive and competitive role and creative role in the middle when the distances are closer, if Thomas isn't in there, right, and we're not doing this kind of firing it long kind of thing. I think maybe we didn't get to speak about Rodriguez quite enough, so just a note on him to say his first half performance, I mean, he looked taller, stronger, quicker, and just better than he did in that first half against Villa. And it is, it's a bit of a tired cliche, the pace of the Premier League, but it is true. The pace of the Premier League is a bit nuts. And perhaps situationally, we weren't protecting him quite as well as we did in this game. And it's important to say that we had that flux in the middle in the first game where, Paquetá would run forward after the ball had been lost, and Souček would be running backward, and it would create the situation where, as they're crossing over halfway between, Guido Rodriguez is actually playing midfield on his own for a moment, which is not ideal for a player that has that smaller zone of influence rather than a really big one like Edson Alvarez or Declan Rice. So yes, we probably structurally and tactically protected him and worked with him a bit better in this game, but he also just looked more confident and better in this game in himself, and I thought in that first half his impact definitely waned in the second half. I thought in that first half he looked quite dominant there in the middle in all of his duels, and did a really good job of turning the ball over and just doing the simple things that you want a defensive midfielder to do for you. And then, we've spoken at length about Thomas and how well he did. So it's interesting. It's interesting to see that unit functioning as well as it did. And then also with Edson Alvarez coming on, with about 15 minutes to go, did a fantastic job in terms of helping us out defensively, added a lot of steel and strength, and covered a lot of ground, and just won the ball back for us. But also, and this is really important because we're thinking about maybe he would be the guy that would come in of the three that would... into that three, and replace probably Souček if we wanted to have a bit more of the ball and have a bit more control over games rather than the chaos that we saw in that first half where, we had some good chances at one end, but Palace also had some really good chances at the other end too. It's really important that when he came on, it wasn't just winning the ball back. He did actually play a really nice, deft, clipped ball over the top for Jared Bowen, who could have scored if not for a really nice intervention from Mark Gay, who actually had a really good game at the heart of Palace's defence.
Yeah, 100%. It bodes really well. I think even just 2 games into the season, I think we see already what we kind of expected of Lopetegui is that switches are a central part of the game for him. It's all about the switches, and if you can hit a switch in deep areas, you will be liked. And to see Alvarez coming in instantly and sort of showing that he does have that in his locker is really exciting. And like you say, it sort of takes some of that burden off of Kilman. Not to say that Kilman will stop doing that at all, or that Mavropanos will stop doing it, but to sort of be able to spread that, it's only going to add a little bit more dynamism. It's going to allow people like Paquetá, like you say, to get further forward and to be able to create this combinative play in the middle and help us play through the thirds, as we were saying earlier. It will allow us to have that sort of link up, because Paquetá inevitably won't have to drop so deep, because Alvarez hopefully will be there to be able to do some of the stuff that Paquetá was coming deep to do, because he didn't feel as though anyone else could. So I think in terms of that issue that we were talking about of the gaps between these midfielders being too much, I think that kind of was not necessitated, but it was a product of areas in which we were lacking, and then other people having to come in and pick up the slack, which creates a bit of dysfunction and a lack of organisation. So I think with Alvarez in, for all that we've said about how good Souček's been, I think bringing in Alvarez will add a bit more balance, which should only lead to good things in terms of sort of those slight tweaks that we want to see in midfield, and a little bit more fluidity in terms of how we sort of unlock that middle core, and then in turn are able to release the likes of Bowen, Kudus, hopefully not Antonio, because I don't really know if I want to see him in that front three again, but that's probably a nice way to leave it for another break, I guess.
Well, before we do, just lastly on Edson, I think we, just to drill into that point about him being able to play a ball over the top, it's just to say that when he is playing in a 3 with Paquetá and Guido, he is going to have to pick those moments where it is right to disconnect from Rodriguez and move forward, and then have that impact in the final third. And if he can play a few of those balls in each run of games between an international break or a cup match or whatever, doesn't have to be every game, but maybe one every other game, that's really the kind of impact we need him to have. That's all. And if he can produce that, then it will ease Lopetegui and the coaching staffs any fears they may have about what the midfield could look like, and perhaps it lacking a little bit of support for Paquetá creatively. It will ease those fears a lot, and it certainly eases my fears a lot seeing him do that. So we just spoke about the impact that Edson Alvarez had from the bench in that second half, and another player that had a huge positive impact from the bench, and someone that, I got a really sarky message from Cal yesterday, saying, "Oh well, I think Jack was saying something about Soufal and Wan-Bissaka being on the same level technically, and Wan-Bissaka not being a huge upgrade, and then he came on and moved like prime Ronaldinho. So question mark. Yeah. So do you know what? I'm just going to shut up and let you run with this one so you can enjoy it.
No, we got to hold each other to account. That's the standards we set at the pod. But no, yeah, obviously I was being sarcastic, and I would be lying if I said that I expected Wan-Bissaka to come in and do that straight away.
Well, no, every week. Yeah. No, that's the baseline now. You need to go charge upfield, take 2 players on, and then slip a nice ball inside.
Mate, it was the fact that he managed to get the outcome that he did, because I thought, okay, this run is really nice, and now you're turning back on yourself because they've stifled you a bit, and here's like the inevitable, and the move ends, and we actually didn't achieve anything out of it because he's kind of run himself into a dead end. The poke pass off the back of the outside of the foot was just so good, just so clever to be able to spot that while he's turning back away from goal and back to his own goal. I think that was probably, if not the most aesthetically pleasing part of it, the most impressive part, I think, and the most exciting part for me, in terms of they've literally been, well, it's the first time they'd been on the pitch. They'd been on the pitch together minutes, and already a relationship is forming in terms of an awareness of where he is on the pitch, where he's around him. And I think the second part that was really exciting in that move, but also consistently throughout the game, was that, and it's definitely not reflected in the data because he never actually received the ball in these moments, but it was attacks that Wan-Bissaka facilitated in build-up and then didn't touch the ball again, but he was constantly making that overlapping run. There were times where I think Bowen could have played the reverse pass on the outside and we would have been bang on for a cutback across the box and potentially a goal-scoring opportunity. At times we didn't play that ball because it wasn't the best option, and we recognised that, and we actually ended up going on to create better chances by playing inside. But I think at times there were also moments where it was like, actually, if we'd have just hit that overlap there, we would have had an even better chance, and we potentially go away and win this 3-0. But like I say, it's not going to get picked up in the data because he wasn't receiving the ball as often as he could in those areas. But the fact that he's got the commitment to just make that overlapping run every single time, whether he's going to get it or not, and just know that he needs to be in that position, because if he does get it, he's there. I think that is really exciting and kind of answers the question marks that we had at the start of the season about how does he fit? Does he tuck inside? Is he going to be an inverted fullback, creating a back three that allows midfielders to go further forward? Does he really have that overlapping threat? How technically capable is he in build up? What's he going to offer? In terms of a debut cameo and sort of setting the benchmark of where your performances are and what you're likely to do and offer to this team, I think it's fair to say that we will probably see Lopetegui use him as that overlapping fullback that we knew that Jesus Navas was at Sevilla. And I think, as far as an introduction goes, I'm really excited to see it. If he can bring that sort of energy and athleticism and technical competency week in, week out, then he'll be a massive, massive addition. And that's without even touching on the sort of recovery defending, how well he does to get back once he's in those advanced positions. I think times you see Soufal get into those positions and it's like, okay, well, he's not going to be involved in defending this transition because there ain't no way he's getting back. As much as he'd try, he just isn't. He just doesn't have the legs to do that anymore. It's not because he couldn't be asked. It's just he can't keep up. But yeah, super excited, super excited. And I think of all the people that we saw come in, I think he's the one that's probably knocking on the door to break into the starting 11, possibly even in the next game.
I think he smashed it down, didn't he? Really. The key things you mentioned there are athleticism and the recovery.
Yeah.
Enabled really by his athleticism. The fact that he can go like that on counterattacks, get so high and then get back, tuck all the way back in and be perfectly fine doing that is huge. It's huge for us. And I love that you mentioned as well about his movement and the fact that he's there and it doesn't necessarily pop up in the data because we don't pass to him. And that doesn't, for me, always mean that actually what we should be doing in those situations is passing to him and using the overlap. What we probably need to be looking at it as is that on those counterattacks, because he's got the athleticism to go, now there's a 2v1. So people can't double up on Bowen anymore. Yep. So now Bowen's going to start scoring loads of goals in those situations.
Well, that's
more
it.
Goals in those situations.
Back the defender, hopefully.
Exactly. Because there's that extra option. So
It's why
I'm not
Bowen
sure.
was so effective when Sufal was at his best, right? It's because
I mean,
Sufal at his best would do that, and then Bowen has the space on the edge of the box to go in or to get a shot off. And I think, like you say, hopefully we see this to the nth degree, and Bowen just kicks it on again, if that's even possible.
and that's all really summed up by him making that overlapping run for the goal for Bowen. I mean, we're talking about him going to be, being someone that's going to unlock Bowen and get him scoring so many goals, and we see that in action in his first 15 minutes on the pitch. And I feel for Chadi Riyad because I don't think he had a brilliant game on his Premier League debut. He did look a lot like a 21-year-old centre back on his Prem debut, being a little bit overwhelmed by different situations, struggled in the air at times, and I thought he, on several occasions, tried to play really positive passes that are just not passes that you can make in the Premier League. You just can't play diagonal passes into the far side double pivot player in the Prem from left centre back because in the time that it takes for the ball to go from where you are to Adam Wharton, there are two players on Adam Wharton by the time he's receiving the pass, and you might get away with that at Real Betis in La Liga. It's not going to run in the Prem. So saw a few moments like that for him, and actually it's on the goal he's defending Bowen, and it's Wan-Bissaka coming all the way forward from right back, sprinting past Bowen, that forces Riyad to take just those extra couple of steps, which allows Bowen to cut inside, get a shot off. And if we can see that working between the pair of them every week, every week is a mad expectation, but that would be very, very exciting. Another player that had big impact and big positive impact, even if he wasn't able to take his two chances, was Niklas Fullkrug, winning 5 aerial duels, the most of any player outside of the top 6 this week, or the joint most out of any player outside of the top 6 teams this weekend, despite only being on the pitch for half an hour. And in that conversation that we're having about if he's there, does Thomas Souček need to be there? Can you go long to him and then have Paquetá actually being the player that's receiving and then playing passes through for Bowen and Kudus? There was some really exciting signs there, and his movement as well was something that I thought was very obviously impressive. In a short cameo, I think the confidence will come when he gets that first goal, and we were so exciting as a counter-attacking force with him on the pitch and him complementing the two either side of him so well, just actually by being a presence that moves well in the centre of the pitch, that doesn't drift out too away from that stays in the middle of the pitch and keeps the centre-backs more narrow. I could see us, one goal comes for him, it could unlock a lot for us as an attacking unit.
Yeah, 100%. It's funny, isn't it? Because we always used to talk about how great Antonio was at creating space for particularly the wide players, but also on occasion the central midfielders if they were box crashing, because of what force he was and sort of how often defenders would be forced to double team him because of how physical he was, or because he'd peel off to that left wing and drag people out there. But I think increasingly, and we've seen it with Antonio being on the pitch these last few games, I think what you said there about Fullkrug being sort of a similar presence, he sort of still demands a similar amount of attention, but he's not gonna drag all the way out wide. And I think as much of a positive as it has been for Antonio previously, I think more and more it's become the case that it's become a bit of a hindrance. I think he sort of is occupying spaces that we don't need or don't want to be occupied because Kudus is there, and you don't want to drag that much attention into that area of the pitch because it limits the amount of space in which Kudus can actually operate. And one thing that we know that Kudus needs to be effective is a lot of space to attack. And if Antonio's there dragging a centre-back out with him towards the full-back, instantly it's more difficult for Kudus because there's two defenders out there, a central midfielder going out as well, presumably to cover the flank, and Antonio also being a big old body that's in the way and probably causing problems anyway. So I think having someone, like Fullkrug, who offers a focal point if Kudus is unable to get a shot off himself or dribble into the box, he can just clip a ball in. And Fullkrug is, as you say, he won 5 aerial duels. He's going to be a threat in the box, which adds an element that I think we've not necessarily had as consistently as we would like with Antonio, because a lot of the time it's him putting the cross into the box, and as Souček's not there, we don't really have much beyond Bowen, that is. So I think, yeah, just it's a really promising thing, and I think as well in different ways, but he still will create space for Bowen and Kudus, but I think more so in different areas, and probably areas that we want, because you're less likely to see centre backs steaming forward to close down that space on the edge of the box, because all of a sudden they're leaving Fullkrug open in the box, and instead of Bowen wrapping off a shot on his left foot towards the far post, if a centre back steps up to close him, well, he just rolls the ball forward in behind the centre back, and Fullkrug's one-on-one with the keeper, and you can't take that risk in the same way that maybe you would be willing to take that risk with someone like Antonio, because he's not as lethal of a finisher. That's the gamble you take. So I think that is really promising. And like you say, if the centre back doesn't step forward and stays with Fullkrug, then all these shooting opportunities are back for Kudus and Bowen, because these pockets of space that we weren't able to engage quite so frequently last season all of a sudden are opening up again. So I think, yeah, it's I think it's a good laugh. It's a good laugh, but it's just funny looking at all these pieces slowly fall into place. I'm like, shit, I see the vision. It's all starting to work. I can see how all these pieces, once they're fully together and locked in, I can see the knock-on domino effect of how it all starts to slot together systematically.
Yeah, I think the one question mark still is, even though we spoke about the positives with Edson coming in and offering a little bit going forward, is there is that lingering question mark for me over the impact that a carrying number 8 could have for us in that position to complement Paquetá. I've said previous, I don't really know how well someone like Kefram Turam has been doing in recent seasons. I caught up with him a little bit when I was watching Todibo to prepare for his arrival. So this is not me saying that he's the guy to go for, but when you think of his ability, someone like him to drive through the centre of the pitch, commit players, and therefore open opportunities for his wingers in a West Ham scenario, Bowen and Kudus, or the midfielder alongside him, Paquetá in a West Ham scenario, would be just so destructive as part of that unit, and so incredibly useful to us as an attacking force. And that's the one thing that I look at in the squad and say, even if it's not someone that we would start, we just don't have that option, and that's an option I would really like us to have.
100%. I think,
turn to.
This isn't a scouting program, so we're not going to go into that, but Manu Kone is available for cheap. It's been, the price tag is about 15 to 20 million euros. It's been very publicly made available, that knowledge. Like, Mönchengladbach are desperate to sell him for some unknown reason, presumably because he wants to leave and his contract's running down and they want to cash him while they can. But he was in the 90th percentile last season for progressive carries. He's a very good central midfielder. He's young, he's got a high ceiling, and like you say, I don't think he'd expect to be a nailed-on starter, and he would give us that option. I know we're linked with Carlos Soler. That seems to be a done deal now. I don't know if he is necessarily that guy. I don't think of him as that. I think of him more of the sort of tidy number 8 that we've also been looking for, in terms of someone that can help us in that second phase build up, keep things ticking over, give Paquetá an outlet and a bit of more of a bounce pass option. Ideally, I think you probably want both. I'm not sure you get both, but yeah, Manu Kone and Soler, if we could get them both in, would be absolutely insane. The midfield would just be, what an upgrade. But so many moving parts, and with Ward-Prowse and Souček around, it seems unlikely.
Yeah, and one note I do want to make on Antonio as well, and the stuff you said about him. What you mentioned about Kudus being in the team now on that left side is so crucial to that discussion about Mikel, I think, because ultimately it always seemed to work well for us in Europe. I don't think European teams ever really got to grips with the whole Mikel Antonio drives out onto your left centre-back and takes him on the outside, and suddenly what are you going to do because Bowen's now in space on the other side? So how do you answer that question? And that was always really good for us, but it worked when it was Fornals or it was Paquetá on the left wing, because you're dragging players out to that side to then have someone behind you who wants to then spray balls forward to Bowen or Soufal on the other side, not Kudus, who wants that space. You don't, you're eating actually the space that player wants. So we just have a different shape to the front line, which requires a different answer. And I think Nicholas Fullkrug will hopefully give us that. And we've spoken about a lot of players there who could enable Bowen and Kudus to be at their best, but we haven't really spoken about how they played in this game. And forgive us, it's the first one of the season, so we basically spent the whole pod talking about how well everyone's played. And that's a nice thing. We need to have the opportunity to do that at the start of a new season under a new manager. But briefly on them because we're running out of time. Bowen, really strong performance, did a much better job in the same role that he was given in the Aston Villa game. So covering in at right wing back defensively when Tyreek Mitchell went forward, just seemed to be so much more in sync with the right back behind him. Soufal struggled with it a little bit, caught out positionally a number of times. I think counter-pressing situations were a real problem for Soufal in this game, sort of too aggressive or believed he could get to things that he was just never going to get to, and then was leaving Eze free in behind him. But Bowen's positioning was much improved, far more recoveries in this game, just far more impact defensively. You didn't see Tyreek Mitchell having the same kind of impact that we saw Luca Dean having in that first game for Villa. And then also going forward was just so much better, you know, created two big opportunities for teammates and obviously gets his goal as well. And Kudus, you know, we've spoken there really about how much we don't want players to nick his space. He did a lot of great dribbling and carrying in this game, and we've seen him do that consistently at West Ham. And I don't want to do him down in any way, because it's super impactful and it's great, and we need that. And it was still a good performance on that side of things. I just think he can do more for us as a link player between the midfield and the attack. I'd like to see him. He's himself spoken about wanting to be a number 10 or seeing his best position as a number 10. Okay, come and get on the ball turn and start playing the ball into Souček's feet or playing the ball into the striker's feet. I want to see a little bit more of that, because I think he's capable of more there. And I want to see him taking the kind of chances like the one he got in the first half. Yes, it's a snapshot, but he hits the ball so well and so hard, and he's so good at that. Hit the target and you're going to score. As long as you're not smashing it directly at the keeper, very high chance you're going to score because you hit the ball so well. So yeah, I just see him as someone that has done hugely well at West Ham, but now I want to see that next level this season. I want to see him raking up those goal contributions every single week in games like this. You know, this was a 2-0 win. In that second half, we could have pushed it a little bit further. It could have been a 4-0 win in the second half. It wouldn't have been reflective of the game, because Palace were really quite good in the first half and probably deserved more from the game on the whole. And they probably went away feeling like, well, we had a lot of good chances in that game. And if we'd put our chances away, because they came often before West Ham really got into the game and grew as a force, the entire game might have looked different. So it wouldn't have been a fair result in any way. But I just felt we could have squeezed it a little bit more, and the players that could have squeezed it a little bit more really were Kudus and Fullkrug. Could they have taken their chances and given us just that little bit more when they were on the pitch? And the only other thing I want to mention really to finish is, you know, we've spoken about plan B, something that David Moyes didn't have. We've spoken about depth and quality on the bench, something that David Moyes didn't have. And that's not us saying, you know, Moyes didn't have these things because he wasn't backed or because he never had the opportunity to have these things. It's just, you know, he had a preferred way of managing a group of players, a preferred approach. It did a really good job for us in terms of dragging us from where we were in the table to where we then ended up in the table and being in European competitions, actually winning a European competition. You know, these are really big achievements that Moyes had, but ultimately he brought these other limitations that had issues in games, or that created issues in games for us that we perhaps wouldn't have wanted to have. On reflection, certainly now with what we're seeing under Lopetegui, the big thing I want to finish on is, you know, Oliver Glasner beat us 5-2 last season, and there are other things going on. Yes, you know, Elise isn't there, Anderson isn't there. I thought Gahey was really good. He didn't have any of the kind of diagonals that Anderson, you know, didn't see Daniel Munoz activated on the overlap free in the white space at all, really. In this game. Something you saw all the time last season at Palace, with Anderson getting on the ball and hitting a diag out to him and then generating opportunities from that. And the same sort of with that front line. I think Edouard in there, I didn't really understand why he was picked. I don't think his performance did anything to help me understand why he was picked. It just didn't really make any kind of sense to me, him being there on the right hand side. Not any kind of counterbalance to Eze. They don't have that in behind threat. They don't have someone that's going to come deep and get on the ball and turn and start creating. I don't see what he's adding in that position. I actually saw what Ismail Assar was there to do when Ismail Assar came on the pitch. It seemed to make so much more sense, because, okay, you're now dragging the defence a bit, and Eze's got an extra 2 yards to play with, so he can now spin and start to create things with balls into the box and stuff like that. So, of course, there are other things going on. I'm not saying that this is just a fair fight. It's exactly the same team, and Glasner did worse. But ultimately, the point I'm making is that Glasner and so many other managers outdid Moyes when it came to what are you going to do from the bench? How are you going to impact a game? How are you going to change a game? Not just how you set up to play the game from the start. And, you know, Glasner brought Kamada on in this game to try and change it, to try and shift it in Palace's favour. Lerma had some stuff about him in terms of what he was doing in the duels and winning the ball back for them, but wasn't really adding anything in possession. They lacked a bit of thrust from midfield. It was all on Wharton, and then you bring Kamada on in that position to give you a bit of a counterbalance really to Wharton, to have two players that can supply balls forward to the front line. And at the same time, we brought Wan-Bissaka and Fullkrug on, and it's Wan-Bissaka that dribbles Kamada, that goes forward and then gets us that first goal. And that's the kind of thing that I'm just so happy to see with a new manager at West Ham, that we're seeing those tactical battles. I don't think he won the first one against Unai Emery, but I think in terms of how you change the game and what you bring on from the bench, he definitely won this one against Glasgow.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And it's there's a lot of things we were hoping for with Lopetegui, but I think this was definitely one of them. And like you say, it comes with massive improvements to squad depth, of course. He's more equipped to make those changes than Moyes ever was, I think, for various reasons. But you can be equipped and still not do it. And the fact that he's using the tools that have been made available to him is a huge step in the right direction. And I think to bring it full circle, as you said at the top of the pod, the idea that we had Somerville on the bench and he didn't even see the pitch is crazy, because talk about another game-changing talent and what he could have offered. And I guess it kind of links to what we were talking about Kudus as well, and sort of moments where we would have liked to have seen him do things differently, and maybe in game states where we have that sub available and Somerville wants to come on. And I think one of the big takeaways that I've found throughout the game was that Kudus, his take-ons were amazing, but there were definitely times where he rolled inside and I was kind of like, if you were on the right-hand side and you were rolling in into your left foot right now, I'd have so much more confidence. That's not to say that he's not fairly ambipedal. He's good with his right foot. We saw how cleanly he connected with that ball in terms of the power he got behind it. But I just think there's that element of, if you are coming up against those struggles in a game with Kudus and he's having a great impact, but there's just that missing piece, we've got the perfect foil in Somerville. It's Kudus in terms of his ball carrying, but he's right-footed and he plays off the left. So all of a sudden, the issue is fixed, because now he can roll in and he can curl those shots into the far corner. So I think, it's just amazing to see how proactive we were, how well it worked, and also to know that there still was other options if we wanted to change it up. So really exciting in terms of how we move forward. And I think the City game will be really interesting, and it's a nice one to have before the international break, because if we lose at City, and who cares, onto the training pitch, and then the full sort of, all the new signings will probably be bedded in by then, and Lopetegui will really start to know what his first 11 is, and we can really start to dive into what the season could look like.
Yeah, it's a free hit, isn't it? It's a good test.
Yeah,
lets us know what level we're at, and good for some of those new players who will get an opportunity to play against the very best in the league and test themselves against that level. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to the Bournemouth game as well. It'll be really interesting to see which players come in for that game and how they perform. Hopefully we'll see a really good performance from Crescencio Somerville. I think
Tadibo as well, I'd imagine.
Brilliant to see. Yep, Tadibo exactly the same. And we'll be previewing the City game over on Patreon as usual with a whole bunch of other stuff, Player of the Week, Euro Review, everything that we've got going on over there. So if you want to access any of that, to listen to us nattering on a little bit more each week, then please do head over to patreon.com/Analytics United. First week free, and on tier 1 you get access to really the vast majority of it for just a £5. So all of the support we've had over there has been actually just kind of mind-boggling and incredible. It's been a brilliant launch of the Patreon. So thank you so much for all of your support. And if you haven't signed up already, please do. We've got a really nice community developing over there, and chats happening during other games and during West Ham games, so it's been really enjoyable. Really looking forward to the rest of this season, and we will catch you next week on this podcast after the Man City game.